timberclads. I wouldn't want to be in one. This is like a gift to the Federals. The Eastport did sink another vessel. That's its claim to fame, I have to tell you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Korstein. I'm Director Emeritus of the USS Monitor Center at the Mariners Museum and Park. And this is known as the Monitor Legacy Series. Now, there's so much to do about the Monitor, but just realize that not just the Monitor, but the whole idea of naval warfare is going to make a big change as a result of the development of shell guns. Therefore, what do I want to have? I want to have a surface that can make those shell guns bounce off. Consequently, we see the rise of ironclads, first during the Crimean War, and then, of course, the French and the English have frigates, iron frigates, and floating batteries. But the big thing we got to worry about is how does that translate here to America? And the big thing is we had some far-sighted thinking people. One of them was Stephen Russell Mallory, which we've talked about before, but he's the guy that says, I want an ironclad. You know, I want to build one in the Confederacy. I want to build one in Europe. I just want to have an ironclad because that will change. You know, the U.S. Navy had no ironclads. So there was a big race. And the Confederacy, I have to tell you, was desperate for these ships. And some of the initial projects they did were keel-up construction, like the CSS Louisiana in New Orleans. However, many of them at first were conversions. You know, hey, you got a ship, hey, you got an engine, and so I'm going to take that and modify it into an ironclad. And you see this happening quite often. Now, this is the Battle of Island number 10, I think. And basically, that's the ship we're going to be talking about today. So this is known as the Eastport, okay? And it was always known as the Eastport because it was built under a couple of businessmen in northern Tennessee make the decision that they want to have a great steamer, a large steamer that can take cotton down. And so basically the original Eastport was a paddle wheel vessel. It was built and launched in 1852. It had a pretty powerful engine, and it was used prior to the war to transport cotton from up there in Tennessee and Kentucky all the way down to New Orleans so it could be sent overseas. It was said that it could fit on board 54 million pounds of cotton. So, you know, this is an important trade, and it probably went up and down the Mississippi anywhere between 6 and 12 times a year. And so it also carried passengers. Well, when the war erupted, the Eastport was laid up at Paducah, Kentucky, and its captain, Elijah Wood, is going to actually when the Confederates start building Fort Henry, where's that bad boy? There you go. When they start building Fort Henry, Elijah Wood will take his steamer down there and says, hey, you guys want to use this? And, you know, brighter minds like Lloyd Tillman, who sent the request up to General Polk, Polk, and said, yes, we want to. And so they pick a building site that is down in Cerro Gordo, Tennessee. And so basically it's a river landing. And just like the Albemarle, we see pictures of the Albemarle as being built in a cornfield. This ship was no different. So they had to take off all of the upper works. They then had to frame it, and they thought this was going to be great. The Confederates are working on it, and he actually Wood sold his ship for almost $10,000 to the Confederates. And so while it's at Cerro Gordo, it begins to take shape thanks to the efforts of a man known as Lieutenant Isaac Brown. For you all who don't know about Isaac Brown, former U.S. naval officer, his real claim to fame during the Civil War is in command of the CSS Arkansas, which is another boat that's been laid down at the same time, okay, in Memphis. Because the Confederates made a big mistake. They occupied Columbus, Kentucky. Because Kentucky said, we want to be neutral. Nobody can come in. That's bad. They can't fight here. Stay away from us. And so Polk builds this fort in Kentucky, which then tells the Federals, well, yes, we can walk right through Kentucky and attack the vulnerable state of Tennessee because of all the rivers, as we'll see shortly, of Tennessee. So the Tennessee River alone comes into, goes all the way down into Alabama. It is a great lifeline, supply route for the Confederacy. So, of course, we want to counter that. And we counter that by building Cerro Gordo. It's not an important town anymore. That's why it's not on this map. So, and the great thing about it is Isaac Brown is really a go-getter. In fact, there's a shipment of iron that's supposed to go to Memphis, and he gets it to come down to Cerro Gordo so he can put it on his ironclad. In fact, he has enough 2-inch iron plate at the building site to actually clad his ironclad. Now, meanwhile, the Federals, now this is a guy we're going to talk a lot about. This is Seth Leland Phelps. This is as a midshipman. I just have to tell you, his grandfather was at Valley Forge. His father was aide-de-camp to Winfield Scott during the War of 1812. So, of course, Phelps wants to be part of the military glory, and so he joins the Navy and then gets to go to Annapolis and then is assigned to various ships like the Columbus, and he's in the siege of Veracruz, where he's used to mount cannon to bombard, naval cannon to bombard Veracruz. Now, so Phelps is an industrious person, and also he can read a map very well. But he also realizes that the Federals have to take extra steps so that they can operate on the water, because going overland in Tennessee is difficult. Going down the rivers is not. So he is going to be head of a project to build what are called timberclads. Okay, and timberclads, I wouldn't want to be in one. They're not shot proof, maybe musket shot proof, but basically large lumbers are placed on board these ships. The big thing is that they could go anywhere. And so he has 3 under his command, and you can see them all. And these ships are used throughout the Mississippi campaign and the Red River campaign. And there's Phelps. Basically, Phelps is going to have this fleet of gunboats, or squadron of or flotilla, I think it'd be better to said. And that's when Ulysses S. Grant decides, I'm going to go down the Tennessee River. And the Navy is all in favor of it. Of course, the Mississippi Squadron is going to be commanded by Andrew Hull Foote. And they now have ironclads. So the timberclads are just support ships. Their ironclads are going to be city-class ironclads, which do not have enough armor, but they are floating batteries that are somewhat shot-proof. And they came up with some great ideas in building the city-class ships. So basically, they go against Fort Henry, and you can tell that the Confederates have no chance. So once they get past Fort Henry, Seth Phelps is going to take his gunboats down the Tennessee River to attack or to capture. He wanted to burn some bridges, Memphis-Charleston Bridge, that broke communications for the Confederates from the East Coast to the middle of Tennessee. They also wanted to, they heard that an ironclad was under construction somewhere up the Tennessee River. So Phelps takes his little expedition, and they surprise the Confederates. And so the Confederates abandon the building site. And at this time, the ship already has its framing for building into an ironclad for the casemate. It's got the iron for the casemate. Its engines work. And so this is like a gift to the Federals. The Confederates, had already put a ram on it. I mean, it's amazing that the Confederates didn't burn it on the stocks, which is what they do to most ships when they have to abandon certain shipbuilding sites. So I have to say that Phelps decides that this ship would be really idea, I'll get to him in a second, really idea for him to be able to take up to a northern shipyard and finish the conversion. Now, as Phelps will write, Andrew Hull Foote, the Eastport is beautifully modeled, the hull is in excellent shape, condition, and she can be made capable of enduring the fire of batteries, while her speed and manageable qualities will render her specifically useful in this river service. Such a gunboat is very much needed, as the iron-plated boats that we have are very slow, and the old side-wheeled boats are mere shells, able to be disabled by a single shot from the shore. So what is he saying? All these timberclads are bad. Actually, after the Battle of Fort Donelson, we know those city-class poop turtles are not shot-proof. So Phelps says, well, I'm going to build a ship that is going to be not only shot-proof, but it's going to be faster, it's going to be bigger, it is going to be the best ship on the Mississippi. Well, so he will actually formally request that the conversion be taking place. He said it will cost about $20,000. He also said, oh my gosh, it's only going to take us 3 weeks to do it. Well, I have to tell you, there are problems. He misjudged his estimate of times because there were so many shortages. But shortages in manpower and material. Just because they have the iron, they also need wood, they need to have carpenters, they need ironmongers, they need all these people to put this ship together. And they're not all sitting around in New Albany. And no one in New Albany is into building ironclads as of yet. So what Phelps does, and he doesn't use a naval constructor, he elongates the ship to 40 more feet to make it 280 feet in length. She had a 43-foot beam and a 6.3-foot draft. Well, that's a big boat. You know, you got to realize that the CSS Virginia was 262.9 feet in length. So this is the biggest boat on the Mississippi, the largest ironclad in the Western Flotilla. And of course, it's going to be armed with 4 32-pounder smoothbores, 2 30-pounder Parrott rifles, and 2 60-pounder Dahlgren rifles. The final cost to build this ship was a little more than they estimated. It was $56,301. Okay, so they kept good records on that one. The big thing is the first job for the Eastport is to transport POWs, Confederate POWs, down the river to exchange with federal POWs. Now, the ironclad encounters, this is August 1862, the ironclad encounters a lot of problems. Now the Western Flotilla is commanded by this man, David Dixon Porter, who likes the Eastport. He will call it the most powerful ship on the Mississippi. Well, there are problems. Once you get the boat out in the water and use it, what problems emerge? Well, number one, its boilers leaked, which is not a good thing, okay? Because you got to keep up this, it's a high pressure engine, so they got to keep up high pressure steam. So actually, it was too big and heavy to operate in some of the narrow reaches of the rivers along the Mississippi. So it can't like go up the Yazoo River. And it was too heavy and did not have a light enough draft to actually operate in the Mississippi. In fact, it grounded almost every day. So the Eastport's going with this expedition. They get to St. Helena, Arkansas, and Phelps says, well, this ship can't go there, and so we need to send it back to get repaired. And they send it to what is known as Mound City, where James Eads has several shipyards. So they're expecting it to be repaired. The trouble is the whole concept of this ship is wrong. It's too big and unmanageable in the current. Now, it does make 5 knots, so it can stem the current, but that's about all it can do. Now, Phelps gets really depressed. He actually takes over command of the USS Benton, but he's still worrying about the Eastport because he thought the Eastport was his little baby. Remember, he captured it, and by capturing it, he had changed the ship or finished the ship into an ironclad, which is important to the U.S. Navy. So the Eastport will stop at Helena, Arkansas, then it will be removed to Cairo, then it will be taken to Mound City. Phelps actually was highly disappointed with the ironclad. He told Admiral David Dixon Porter that he was unable to shake off the idea of ill luck being the attendant of this vessel. Phelps believed, nevertheless, that alterations to its iron and armament would strengthen it, making the Eastport the best vessel of the fleet. So he's depressed and everything, but Porter writes back faint hearts never won a fair lady. So you must not get faith, you must not lose faith. Hereafter, over the broken bottom of the Eastport, go ahead and try it again. Porter had confidence in both Phelps and the Eastport, noting her best feature is her ram power, which makes her, I think, the best vessel that we have. Well, they lied on that one. And the Eastport will not be ready for action again. Now, at one time, it was the flagship of the Mississippi Squadron. And then they said, well, we can't float downriver in that. It's not going to be that anymore. So consequently, it does not come back into service until January of 1863. Now, Phelps is still disappointed with it because guess what happens? As soon as it leaves Mound City, it runs aground and damages his hull. Back to Mound City it has to go. And his goal was to make the ship the best vessel in the fleet. Now, so they finally have it repaired and prepared to go into action by spring 1864. This is when we have the Red River Campaign. Now, some of you all know about the Red River Campaign, but to briefly tell you that basically the Union fleet under Porter was supposed to support Major General Nathaniel Banks' move to capture Shreveport. Okay, and this is a picture of all the Union ships entering the Mississippi. Believe it or not, the lead vessel was not that steamer you see, but it was the Eastport. And because they still had all this faith, they had put all this money, they thought the ship was great, but it wasn't, and it wasn't going to get any better. So nevertheless, during the Red River Campaign, this ship will play a pretty important role. Now, as you know, Banks is going over ground, right? Franklin is his subordinate, and their idea is to get to Alexandria and then reach all the way up to Shreveport, okay? And actually, the Confederates are building an ironclad in Shreveport called the CSS Missouri, but it's not ready. So the Confederates really have limited resources at first to block the U.S. Navy. In fact, some people ask the validity of the Red River Campaign, and many admit it was merely the opportunity to capture Confederate cotton and sell it on the market, right? So, Porter got a cut. Banks got a cut, everyone got a cut. So they start upriver on 12 March, and now Lieutenant Commander, he gets promoted, Phelps, is back in command of the Eastport. And on 14 March, they are going to attack Fort de Russy, which, I thought my pointer was going to work today, but that's okay, is right here. And this is the only fort on the Red River to stop the Confederate or Union advance. So the Eastport will take a lead in the bombardment of Fort de Russy, and it quickly surrendered. Now, this means that the waters are open, and they have to go all the way up to Alexandria, where they have falls, right? And so they're able, because of the water level, to get over those falls, but it's very difficult. And once they get over the falls, they continue up the river, and then all of a sudden, they learn about two bad things. Number one, that the river is lower than it usually is. That is bad. It's because Porter's ships arrive in Nacogdoches on 2nd April 1864, and the Confederates had sank a ship called the New Falls City, and that blocked the channel. And then Porter learns that Banks has been defeated at the Battle of Mansfield and Pleasant Hill 8 through 9, April 1864. So Banks, because of his defeat, he retreats. And he retreats faster than, guess what? Porter can turn his ship around. Now let's realize how narrow the ship, the river is at this point. And then they got to bring all their ships downriver. Well, this is going to be very difficult. Now the Confederates had, as they see these big boats coming down, what do? They got sharpshooters on the bank. They have, 12-pounders and so small guns firing at the Union transports. Then they also have mines, torpedoes. The torpedoes were mostly electronic torpedoes. That means they'd be fired from an electronic pulse. And so, guess what the good old Eastport does? Now, it's already ran aground 7 times during this campaign. Well, now it hits a torpedo and it sinks in shallow water. But Phelps realizes there's nothing that can be done there's bad Banks. Nothing was to be done to get the ship off the river bottom. So Phelps organizes the stripping of all the equipment off the Eastport. They put 8 barrels of gunpowder and they blow it up. Porter later says no ship can survive that destruction. Well, I have to tell you, the Eastport remains a hazard to navigation for several years until the Red River switches its course, which rivers did in the Mississippi Valley. Now, what I think is important is that the Eastport has not done anything during the war. Yeah, it helped capture Fort DeRussy, but what else did it do? Nothing. In fact, the Eastport was a failed attempt of the Confederates to defend their rivers, and the Federals are able to capture it. Mistake number 1, they elongated it. So what that meant is they're causing the greater weight, even though it elongated it, it's broadened its beam, the elongated weight is going to cause the ship to hog immediately. So they had to put hog chains in. I mean, this is a mess of a ship because you add 40 feet to a ship, guess what happens? The whole concept of the vessel has changed in many ways. And when you add to the beam, that also means you've got these same engines that were designed for a ship 240 feet into one 40 feet longer. And so that is a big problem with the Eastport. They have constant problems with their engines. The greater weight means she's no longer a shallow operating vessel. So that's why when she is sunk, the Federals take no effort to try and free the vessel. So the wreck just lays there under the water because of the wreck. Now remember, the Union forces are all up the Red River. They try to come down the river. They have problems at the falls at Alexandria. Colonel Bailey's dam saves the day. Well, what's going to happen is a transport, the Ed F. Dix, as it's steaming down the Red River, runs into the wreck of the Eastport and sinks on top of the Eastport. So you can say the Eastport did sink another vessel. And that's its claim to fame, I have to tell you. And actually they did archaeology in the late 80s and 1990s, and they found the boat on top of each other, but it was 30 feet away from the river as it had changed. And so they excavate it, they say, wow, it's here, and then they cover it up. Because the Eastport has no fame, so why bring up a vessel that the only ship it sunk was a ship on your own team? And so that generally is not looked upon wisely. I think the Eastport is sends us several different messages. Number one, the Confederacy has got to guard all these rivers, and fixed fortifications because of ironclads do not always work well. They passed Henry, Donelson stops the fleet, but elsewhere those fixed fortifications can be easily bombarded, like Island Number 10, and they surrender. So the Confederates know they're in a rush, and that's why they built. Just think what they're building in February of 1862. Let me go down the list. They're building the Arkansas, the Tennessee, the Louisiana, the Mississippi, the Eastport. So 5 ironclads were under construction. The problem is, where are you going to get the iron? The iron's got to come all the way from Atlanta. They don't have enough workmen, because when the war broke out early on, what did you want to do? You want to stay as a carpenter, or do you want to join the army and get great glory? I wanted to have a little nick and go home and show Louisville that, and she'll love me forever, but that didn't necessarily happen. So the expediency is something the Confederacy could not handle because of the lack of good transportation systems, the production of iron, and actually skilled workers. So when we look at the ironclads laid down in late 1861, one only gets into the river for the Confederacy. That's the CSS Arkansas. The Eastport then is recognized by the Union. Wow, this is a good ship. Now remember, the ship was built in 1852. Its engines for the Confederacy were great, but the engines for the Union were not great, because they have had all this use. They actually have to get rebuilt in New Albany. And we don't think about it, but New Albany is a great industrial naval center at this time, building steamboats, going up and down the Ohio River. So basically, the Federals make the mistake of trying to make the Eastport into a super ship. My point is, any Confederate conversion that has been started by the Confederates is not worth the Federals' time to try and turn it into a viable ironclad, because of engine problems, also because of construction issues. So that Eastport, despite Phelps having these great dreams for it, never achieves those dreams. And so that is the story of the USS Eastport. Thank you again.